My name is Tori Mara, and on behalf of Outspoken Agency, I'd like to welcome you today to another Candid Conversations. We did one last week with another one of our speakers, and we had a great turnout, and we're really excited to have Mary today. A little bit about Outspoken Agency very quickly. We are a speaking agency based in New York City, and we help pair up our speakers with some event hosts who host conferences, private events, business meetings, lecture series throughout the country and frankly throughout the world. So we were finding ourselves really missing out on that time of connection with our speakers and our clients. So we decided to start this series in an attempt to engage with everyone and provide some useful information. And hopefully today will be a good use of your time. Mary, if you want to join me on video now, I'm going to stop sharing this slide, and we welcome you today. Mary, if you don't know much about Mary, Mary is a best-selling author of the book called Managing Up, which is what we're talking about today. And the title is called Managing Up, How to Move Up, Win at Work, and Succeed with Any Type of Boss. Mary has her own organizational and leadership development consultancy called Careerstone Group. And Mary works with many of you, I think, that are on today. And some of our clients might be familiar with her as well. Mary helps clients develop the strategies, skills, and sensibilities needed for success in the 21st century. So I'm sure that much of what Mary has been doing for clients over the years, she'll be able to share with you today. We'll probably talk a little bit more about her book later, and hopefully you can grab a copy so you can learn more about things that Mary doesn't necessarily share today. So Mary,
there I am. Hey, everybody, can you see me? Looks like people can see me.
They're good.
All right. Hi, how's everybody doing? I apologize for the Tori and I did a run through yesterday and I just got off the Zoom thing, but for some reason, Zoom wouldn't take my password on this. So we did a reconfiguration. I changed my computer and somehow it's all working. But anyway, so happy to be here with you all. So welcome and thank you. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to have a fast and furious little conversation about managing up. We're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about why we all need to do it. And I'm going to show you how to do it. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about like the virtual world as well. So we're going to do a little bit of normal managing up and a little bit of managing up in uncertain times. And I know that the lovely Tori has did a quick little poll that we want to reference. So do we have those poll results, Tori? Great. So, oh, this is great. So some of you are executives, middle, manager, advisor, staff, intermediate, staff, associate, entry level. That's fantastic. I really like it when we have audiences with people who are at mixed levels in their career. So here's the thing: for those of you who are already who are not managers yet, but want to be managers, today hopefully I'm going to give you some ideas for how you can manage up, how you can really accelerate your career by building a great relationship. For those of you who already are managers, I want you to be thinking about how is it not only are you managing up, because you still have to manage up, we still have to manage up throughout our career, but how easy are you making it for others to manage up to you? So you're going to have a twofer for today. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, and I am going to share, how am I going to share my slides, which should be working, but for some reason it is not. Who can share? Only host. Oh yeah, I think we have to take the poll down, Tori. Yeah, so Tori, you're gonna need to make it so I can share my screen. You might need to make it so all participants can share their screen.
I just made you the host. Do you have the functions now?
Okay, yeah, let me see. All right, so you know what? This isn't working for my thing. It's not letting me share my slide deck. So here's what we're gonna do. I am going to, wait, are you guys seeing my desktop? Probably not. All right, so you know what, Tori, I'm going to send you my slides and I'm going to go ahead and start. And then when you get them, you can share your screen. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
All right, great. And we apologize, everybody. Actually, we did this yesterday. It worked perfectly. Everything was great. And now it is, as always, it is not really working for us. So just pause. And while we do this, I would love if you guys could chat into your chat into the Dropbox. What is it that what drives you crazy about your bosses? Is there anything that drives you crazy? What are your biggest pet peeves? What do you wish your boss did more of, less of, or differently? Etc., etc., etc. What do you wonder about as a boss? Like, how are you managing up? How could you manage up better? Let's get a little like stuff going on, and we'll get Tori the slides. Bam. They're on their way to you, Tori. Hopefully that will work. And I do apologize, everybody. So here's the thing that we want to know when we talk about managing up. So the first thing is, I wish they were better organized. I know that can be so frustrating. Sorry. I just got a brand new laptop and I was on my desktop earlier. Yeah, they can be frustrating. People aren't organized. They know what they're doing. They're not very good at it. Too scattered, like I am right now. So here's the thing that we need to know about managing up. First of all, we have to understand that the workplace is a social system, which means that in a social system, we have to work with other people, right? We have to work with other people. We have to work through other people. Sometimes we have to work around other people in order to get our work done. And in a social system, relationships matter. All of our relationships matter. The relationships with our team members matter. The relationships with our colleagues matter, our clients, our stakeholders, and our relationships that we have with our bosses, which is probably one of the most important relationships that we have in the workplace, is that which we have with our boss. And so when we talk about managing up, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about managing that relationship. We're talking about managing the relationship that's going to have a lot of impact on our career. So managing up technically is about doing what you can do to create a robust, successful, effective working relationship with people who are above you in the food chain, people that have influence over your career, in order for you to be successful, for your manager to be successful, and for the organization to be successful. It's a threefer, right? So it is not, I want to be really clear what managing up is not. Managing up is not about sucking up. It's not about being a sycophant. It's not about kissing someone's behind or licking someone's boots. That is called manipulation. Managing up is managing that relationship when people have a different personality than you. Maybe there are no they're difficult, they have different perspectives, different personality preferences, different priorities, different ways of being, some of which can be really difficult. But it's what we can do to actually manage that relationship, again, so that we can work well with them and that we can succeed, they can succeed, and the organization can succeed. One of the things that's essential to understand is that there's three, so that's what it is. There's three main reasons why we have to do it. Number one, we have to do it because your boss matters. Like, our bosses matter. They have a lot of influence over our career trajectory. They have a lot of influence over our ability to get opportunities. They have a lot of ability to influence our exposure in the organization, in the industry. Like, they have a lot of influence over whether we get good opportunities or not so good opportunities. They have a lot of influence over our career trajectory and our career path. So that matters. The second thing that matters is that your careers matter. Everybody on this webinar has a career, and nobody should, nobody can be the captain of your career more than you do. You have to care about your career more than anybody. And if part of managing your career is managing that relationship with your boss, then it's really on us to do what we can do to manage our career. And the third reason why managing up is so important is because as much as we wish it wasn't true, we cannot control other people. We cannot change who they are. All we can do is change how we respond to other people. All we can do is control our own reactions, our own actions, our own behaviors, and our own choices. So if your hand, the hand that you're dealt is with a boss who's difficult, then you have to understand what you can control and what you can't control. We can only control our part of the relationship. Now, we can always ask for people to behave differently or to treat us differently, to give, to interact with us in a way that works for us, but there's no guarantee that they could, or they will, or that they even can. And secretly, most of us, if we are being honest, actually kind of like the way that we operate, right? How many of you like the way you operate? Raise your hand, give us a chat. Like, yes, I like the way I operate. Of course you do, because that's why we do it. And by the way, it should be every single person on that thing should be raising their hand, because you do what you do every day. So some of you, so we like how we operate. It makes sense to us. It works for us. So we secretly wish other people would operate the way that we do. And when we're asked to operate in a way that's out of our comfort zone or out of our preference zone, we tend to get a little annoyed. We tend to get a little frustrated. We tend to get a little judgy about other people. So, for example, how many of you have noticed that I'm kind of a fast talker? Who's noticed? Raise your hand if you've noticed that I talk fast. Yeah, I do. It's a problem sometimes, probably a lot of the time, but I like fast talking. All right, how many of you like the fast talking? Go ahead and raise your hand. Yeah, I do too. Now, I know some of you probably wish I would slow down a little bit. Who wishes I would slow down just a little bit? Yeah, because you know what I secretly wish? I secretly wish that other people could just listen faster. If they could listen faster, then I could just be me, right? But that's not the way the world works. So we have to, when we start to manage up, we have to really think about our preferences versus other people's preferences. And sometimes we have to let go of the way that we want to do things, even if they're the right way, in order to align our work styles with somebody else. So that's the key thing. So our boss matters, our career matters, and we can't control or change other people. And Tori, if you ever get the slides, let me know. We can throw them up here. Oh, the slides have arrived. Yay! So Tori, if you can want to bring them up there, we're going to start with slide number 6, the truth about bosses. So as Tori's getting that up, oh, that's great. And we'll go to number 6. Bam, bam, bam. Ooh, I like that's in one, baby, right there. You can go ahead and put in a slideshow. All right, so we have to, in order to talk about managing up, we do have to talk about what I say, the truth about bosses. And the truth about bosses is this. Sometimes they're not very good at being bosses. It doesn't mean they're not good people. It just means sometimes they don't get the boss thing exactly right for you. Studies have shown that 75% of Americans, of US workers, say that their boss is the worst part of their day, the worst part of their day. And by the way, Canada says the same thing. How many of you raise your hand if you've ever had a boss that was the worst part of your day? A lot of hands go up, right? Does this mean that bosses are bad people? No, of course not. It just means that bosses sometimes aren't very good at being that boss. Poor managers or poor relationships with managers still remain one of the top 3 reasons why employees are unhappy and why they leave organizational life. And here's why. It's not because these people are bad people, but here's what organizations tend to do. We tend in America, and apparently Canada too, actually it's all of Western Europe, we tend to promote people based on their technical skills, their ability to be a good individual contributor. And so when this happens, we, like, for example, you're great at sales. So congratulations, Michael Scott, you are now head of sales. You're an amazing writer. Congratulations, you're now in charge of communication. That spreadsheet you did, That was a work of art. Congratulations, Chief Financial Officer. And so we promote people based on their technical skills without actually taking too much of a look at whether or not they have the aptitude or the acumen to be good people managers, right? Because managing is not only about results, it's about people. So that's the first thing that goes wrong. The second thing that happens is there's not often a lot of other places, a lot of other ways to get ahead in your career or in your organization unless you go into management, right? So that's usually the only path upwards. So there's a lot of people that take that management path because it's their only path to promotion. How many of you, raise your hand if you've ever had a boss who didn't want to be a boss? Right? A lot of times happens. Do a lot of work with the federal government. This is very common. There's not a lot of ways up to further your career without going in management. That's the second thing that happens. The third thing that happens is that we don't give our managers enough training. We don't give them enough true, deep understanding or learning about how to be a manager until after they've been a manager for many years. Harvard recently did a study where they found that most people get their first taste of management when they're in the late 20s, early 30s. That's when they first become a supervisor or a team lead or are put in charge of managing. And then they ask them, when did you get training, significant training in how to do this job? And most people said their late 30s, early 40s. So we have a 10-year gap between people start to manage and before they actually get any decent training on management. So what this means is you have perfectly good people that may be doing the best job they can, but they're not necessarily ready or equipped to be really great managers. On top of all that, and that's just in normal times, people. Right now, we're going through, we're going through a very difficult time where millions and millions of Americans are now suddenly shifted into remote work. And let me tell you, few managers are ready for remote management. There are still, even though telework has been on the rise for a long time, it is still not as prevalent as you would think. There's still not a lot of managers who were ready to take on remote management 1%. How many of you have managers who've never actually managed the remote team before? Please go ahead and raise your hand. Yeah, a lot of you. Right? So this is something that we have to really think about. So we're going to talk today about some skills or strategies to manage your manager remotely and in general as well. So you can go ahead and advance the slide, Tori. I'll just say slide. So here's what's going to happen. When you are in the workplace, you are going to have a spectrum of experience with different kinds of managers, right? On the one hand, you're going to have managers that are amazing, that are fabulous, that you are in sync with them. You're aligned with them. They're aligned with you. You understand them. They understand you. You value them. They value you. It's like bluebirds bring you coffee every day, right? We call this the unicorn boss, the dream boss. How many of you have or have had a dream boss? Good. A lot of you have, right? And so when you have this kind of boss, there's not a lot of managing up you have to do. You just get to go to work and be you and maintain a great relationship. That is awesome. Now, the other end of the spectrum, you may have what I call, that's the red face, you may have what I call the truly terrible, the toxic boss, the screamer, the shouter, the narcissist, the bully. This is the boss who's abusive and abrasive and demeaning and devaluing. This boss is the toxic boss. How many of you have ever had a toxic boss? Okay, that makes me sad. And if I would ask you if you have one now, I will tell you this. When you have the toxic boss, and maybe we'll do another webinar on just the toxic boss. If you have the toxic boss, there's not a lot of managing up you can do here either. What you have to do with this boss is you have to manage your survival. You're never going to thrive with this. And I'm going to tell you one thing here is that if you have this boss, you have to get out. And I mean that sincerely. Get out. Your toxic boss will make you sick. It will, and I mean that physically and psychologically. It's a really bad scene. So if you have a toxic boss right now, hopefully the remote work is giving you some relief while you can plan your exit. So there's not a lot you can do with that, but really protect yourself and get out. But in the middle, you might have bosses that are a little bit annoying, a little bit difficult, a little bit frustrating. You may have bosses that are pretty annoying, pretty difficult, pretty frustrating. or bosses that are really annoying, really difficult, and really frustrating, but not truly toxic. And so this is where the art and the heart of managing up lies, in these center categories where we have to figure out, navigate, create strategies to align ourselves with bosses who may be a little difficult to a lot difficult to work with us. Tori, go ahead and pass it. And so that's the what, that's the why. Let me show you the how. The how is really, really simple. In fact, I can't believe I wrote a whole book on it, but I could, because it's simple, but it's not easy. It's actually a very difficult thing to do. So the first three steps, the first step is we have to really learn our boss's work style, really pay attention to how she works, pay attention to his preferences, pay attention to their priorities, their pet peeves. This means being able to take a good, honest look at who our boss really is, not who we wish they were, but who they really are, and how they prefer to operate. And we don't want to judge them. You just want to notice, because the minute we start judging other people, whether they're your boss, your colleague, your significant other, once we start judging, we get trapped by our amygdala if we're judging them negatively. And once we get trapped by our reptile brain, we cease to be as strategic as we could be. So just notice, without judgment or rancor, how they like to operate. So that's step number one. The second step is you're going to have to notice how you like to operate. And again, I want you to be honest with yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your own preferences, priorities, pet peeves? And by the way, I don't want you to judge yourself either. This is neither good nor bad at this point. This is just about really developing great self-awareness about how you like to operate and your preferences. Once you have a good look at who your boss is, who your boss really is, not who you wish they were, and who you really are, not who you wish you are or you think you are, then you get to assess the gap. And in that gap, you get to choose how you want to adapt. You get to choose how you want to create and work and react and interact with that person. Now, we can't control that person. We can't change that person. Again, you always can request how you want to be treated. But if we can't have control, we can get our power from actually understanding what we have power over. And what we have power over is our own choices. And by the way, I don't care if you take a good look at who your boss is and who you are, and you choose to do nothing differently. I don't care at all. What I care about is that you stay in choice, because it's the being in choice that gives you the power. How many of you know people that sit around and blame everybody else for everything in their life, but they don't do anything differently? Yeah, a lot of us. Those are career victims. When we stay in choice, when we actively choose, you know what? That person's a micromanager. I'm good with that. I'm not going to email them every 5 minutes, and I'm okay. And once you make that choice, you can't complain about it, right? So it's about deciding what we want to take action in, and when we don't, we need to let go. So those are the three basic areas. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper to show you exactly where to look. So Tori, we'll go ahead and move forward. So there's kind of 6 basic areas I recommend that you look at when you're trying to figure out who your boss is, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. And I will say this, so you may have had your boss, the puzzle figured out from your boss as an in-person boss, but now you're gonna have to maybe redo this whole sort of assessment of them as you pay attention to how they're working virtually. So one thing to look at is their communication preferences. Are they introvert? Are they extrovert? Do they prefer to speak face-to-face or verbally or on the phone? Do they prefer an email? Do they want a lot of communication or just a little bit? Really try to pay attention to how your boss likes to communicate and how you like to communicate. My team knows I'm an introvert. I prefer less is more. If you want to call me, you better text me first because I'm not picking up the phone, right? So really get to know what your preferences are and where your bosses are. What is their work style? That's another area. And this is a big area. This is where different personality assessments can become very useful for you. Look at things like, are they collaborative or are they independent? So a more collaborative boss probably wants to be involved with the project. They might want to talk about a lot. They might want a lot of check-ins on the project. An independent boss may be just tossing you that project and saying, call me when it's done, right? Let me know when it's done. And they don't like to work as a team, more independent. Is your boss cautious, or are they innovative? Is your boss like loves new ideas? Let's try anything. Let's do it. Or are they like, no, let's like cross every T, dot every I? Are they detail or big picture people? Like really try to figure out how they work. Oh, and by the way, if you guys email me or Tori, we're going to send you a whole bunch of stuff to help you figure out who your boss is and how they like to operate. But really figure that out and what's true for you. Time orientation and pace is also another important area to look at. So time orientation is basically how they view time. Are they someone that wants things done very quickly, or do they view time as something that is long lasting? Are they punctual? Are they hyper punctual? Or is punctuality just a concept for them? So I am a very hyper punctual person. So when I say to my team, well, we'll meet at 10 o'clock, you know, what time do I want to see them? I want to see them at 9:45, because by 9:50, I think they're late and they're dead to me, right? So understand the punctuality piece of your boss. Also understand their pace. Are they fast paced? Would they say, let's work on this? I'd like to see the Penske file. Do they mean it today? Do they mean it next week? Like really understand their pace. The other thing about time orientation, which is going to show up big right now in the remote work, is there's a lot of bosses that still equate work ethic with how many hours I see your butt in that seat, right? So they equate work ethic with seeing your butt in that seat or seeing you and the work. And that's going to be a big shift for many managers. When we work with managers who are going to go remote, that's one of their biggest obstacles. It's hard for them to trust that people are working when they can't see them. So really, you're going to have that conversation with your boss, because what we're going to talk about in a few minutes is how you're going to negotiate your work hours, because they may not look the same now that you're remote and cohabitating and taking care of children and distance learning for your kids and all that. So that's a conversation we're going to have. Another thing to look at is, are your people, are your bosses, and are you task oriented or are you relationship oriented? So a task oriented boss like me walks into your office, I pick up the phone, I'm like, hey, where's that Penske project? And my team will say, oh my God, well, good morning to you too, right? Or you may have a boss who's more relationship oriented that wants to like check in with you. How are you? How is the family? And you're thinking, oh dear God, if you don't get to the point soon, I am going to shiv you with my pencil, right? So it's about understanding that. And especially now, we're going to talk about that again in a moment. A lot of task-oriented bosses are trying to be relationship-oriented, and it may be easier or hard for them as we're kind of checking with people. The fifth area you want to look at is goals and motivations. How many of you have goals and motivations in your life? Raise your hand. Things that you want to make happen, priorities, motivators, right? Goals, right? We all do. And this is the area where I see that people tend to get really judgy over other people, right? I hear all the time in our consulting work, well, my boss, she just wants to get promoted. Well, my boss just cares about like visibility. And I'm thinking, well, don't you? Like, don't you kind of care about promotion? Don't you care about like getting credit? Don't you care about like your career? So you don't need to agree with your boss's goals and motivations. You really don't, but you do need to learn what they are. And I want you to learn what they are without judging, because the more that you can learn about what's driving your boss and oh, someone's loving me right now. I'm loving you too, La Tamara. The more you can learn about what's driving your boss, what motivates them, the better you can get insight into who they are and how you can figure out how to work that relationship and align yourself with them. Again, I'm not going to tell you you have to agree with your boss's goals and motivations, but you do need to know what they are without judging them. The last piece you want to look at when you're putting together the boss puzzle is what we call concerns and climate. You can't, it's the culture, it's what's going on. In systems, even in organizational systems, the dynamics of the system is going to have a lot of influence over people's behavior in that system. So what I want you to look at is your culture. What does your culture promote? What does your culture reward? Who succeeds in your culture? Who doesn't succeed? What is the culture incentivize? What does it disincentivize? Your boss is working within an organizational system, so you need to understand what that is. What's the climate of your organization? What's the climate of your stakeholders? What do your stakeholders care about? If any of you are working for the federal government, you know you have the American public, you have Congress, you have a lot of stakeholders that are influencing what has happened. So we need to pay attention to that. What does your boss worry about? What does her boss's boss worry about? What does his boss's boss worry about? Like, these are all important things to take into account. So you want to keep your antenna, your spidey sense up all the time, putting together your piece, putting together the puzzle that is your boss. And as we shift into this remote work, we may think we knew the boss, and we do know our boss, but now we may be dealing with a boss who's also dealing with something different. So we may have to relook at our puzzle. So go ahead and advance. So at the end of the day, remember, my friends, we only have control. That's us in the green circle. We only have control over ourselves. We can only control our words, our deeds, our actions, our thoughts, our reactions. Our bosses, our colleagues, our spouses, our children, everybody else we know is in our circle of influence. And then there are things we have no control or no influence in. And those are things like COVID right now. So my message for you is, if we can be really just a little bit more skillful and choiceful about how we choose to interact with people, how we choose to react to them, greatly increases your ability to influence. So it's about taking control where we can take control to build the relationships that we need to build so that we can be successful, others can be successful, and the organization can be successful. So that is the heart and the art of managing up. Now, if we go ahead and we move slides, I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about how to do this virtually. So the first part of this talk was really around giving you the basics of managing up, which you can apply all the time. But I know that now is a little difficult as we're facing kind of some new ways of working for many of us. How many of you right now, by raising your hand, how many of you, this is your first time, full-time working remotely? Go ahead and raise your hand. 2022, 24. Yeah, about half of you, a good chunk. Yeah, because Michelle, yeah, so this is a big time for everyone to go recently. So go ahead and go advanced slide. So I'm going to give you some tips about how you can manage with your boss. All right. First of all, you want to stay connected to your boss. Keep them in the loop. My advice is this: connect and check in with them every single day. It doesn't mean a long phone call, it doesn't necessarily mean a Zoom meeting, but you want to stay in their radar. Maybe it's a daily email. Here's what my priorities are today. Are these right? Or here's what I got done. Or, hey, boss, do you need anything from me today? You want to make sure not a day goes by that you don't check in with them, even if it's just something short and sweet. Stay on their radar. For people that are used to working remote while everybody else works together, one of their biggest fears is that they may get overlooked for promotions because they're not on their boss's radar. So people who are very successfully being the one remote worker really understand the importance of staying on the boss's radar. It's all too easy to fall off that radar. So you're going to want to be proactive, especially if your boss isn't good at staying connected with you. If they're not, you be proactive. You send an email. You schedule meetings and calls with them. Keep them updated. So my team has always been virtual, so this is not a big deal for us, but it's a big deal for our clients. So we're trying even harder to keep each other updated about what we're working on and what's going on. So I really appreciate that my team is giving me extra updates as they are helping navigate some of our client work and moving it virtually. So never, I mean, this is a great rule of thumb anyway, never assume your boss knows how productive you are. Never assume that. You always have to remind your boss of your value in making sure they know how productive and what you've gotten done, especially now, because I'm telling you, most managers are not comfortable yet with this remote work and they are trying to figure it out. The more proactive you can be about showing them that the work is getting done and you're being productive, the better off you are. All right, slide. So be transparent and be available. The number one worry that remote managers have is that their people aren't going to be available and they're not going to be there to get the work done. So what I want you to be able to do is be honest about your work schedule. And I mean when you're actually available and when you're not. Your time boundaries and constraints. Listen, if you're we are all in the same boat. Well, but many of our boats may look a little different, right? We're all in the same boat about virtually, but many of us are now dealing with children at home, cohabitant spouses, roommates, other people, sharing small spaces, having to do childcare, house duties. Like, it's a lot. So you are going to want to really be clear and transparent about your work schedule. And you may have to negotiate some of these boundaries. You may have to say to your boss, honestly, hey, listen, I have a small child. So I'm gonna, my husband and I, or my, wife and I, however you want to, whoever you're co-parenting with, if you are, we're gonna be trading off. I'm gonna be available from 10 to 2, from 4 to 6, whatever it is. Make sure that you are really communicating your work schedule, your time boundaries, and your constraints. Negotiate where you need to. And I mean this both with the people you work for, people you work with, and the people that you are living with. It could change day to day, but you want to be transparent about this. Put it on your calendar. The more transparent you can be to your boss about when you are actually available and when you're not, the better off that you can be. And you want to be available when you say you're available. So if you say to your boss, I am available from 10 to 2 or 10 to 12, from 12 to 2, I'm on child duty, from 2 to 4, I'm available. You want to be clear, and then you need to be responsive if they respond out to you. You also need to let them know if they desperately need to reach you when you're unavailable, how to do that. So monitor your communication channels. Don't say, just call me. If you need a text, text. Be really clear. Speedy response time is really great. This is all about building trust, getting them used to the idea of you're working in a different fashion and sort of a different things, building trust. That's really going to help your boss. They know that they get a response from you in a timely fashion. That will be great. Slide. Seek feedback and take initiative. So this is actually a time during our remote working where you can get a lot of feedback and you can really be entrepreneurial. So I would recommend early on during remote working that you're going to check in frequently both on work product and virtual engagement. So I would recommend every week I would have a quick call with my boss and say, hey, just want to check in. How's the work? How get some feedback, what's working well with the new way we're working, and what could be differently. And I want you to talk both about like the product and what you're producing and how you're doing the virtual engagement. Are we connecting enough? Are we connecting too much? What's working for that? This is going to be a negotiation, a relationship rebuilding, if you will, rebranding, if you will. You can use a plus delta is a really simple way to do this. And the plus delta is simply, hey, what worked well about this week? What are things we could do more of, less of? That's the delta, or differently. So what's working well, plus delta. Be on the lookout for, because I get asked all the time, what if my manager is really bad at managing, at virtual management? Well, you know what? This is an opportunity. Be proactive, make it work, but look for opportunities to enhance teamwork or the processes. Like, this is when we have big crises like this is when creativity is so paramount. So this is an opportunity for you to flex some of your own leadership skills for looking for opportunities to enhance how things are doing. To say, hey, boss, you know what? I bet if we did a Zoom meeting instead of this meeting, it might work better. I think if we did this instead of that, I think that might help us in this remote work. So really look for opportunities where you can add value. It's also a great opportunity to learn or hone new skills. Like, if I was any one of you, I would become the Zoom master or the Adobe Connect master, or whichever platform you are using now, you become that person. And my last tip is be entrepreneurial. Like, this is a time where there are gaps, there are problems, there are unforeseen circumstances of going virtual. Be the one that comes up with the solutions and the ways forward. This can be very, very helpful. And make sure you run them by your boss and you support as much as you can. Slide. All right, communication skills. We talked about this in the beginning, so I'm going to talk about this again because this is one of the most important things that you can do, both virtually and physically. So we're going to talk about two different communication styles that are going to show up quite a bit in, they show up anyway, but they're going to show up a lot in the virtual world. So go ahead and do the slide. We're going to talk about introverts and extroverts. And we're going to talk about introverts and extroverts for three reasons. Number one is that introversion, extroversion is about source of energy. So you always want to know how your boss is energized or de-energized, and how you are energized or de-energized, because you don't want to be the person that de-energizes their boss. Especially now with all this extra stress we're having, people's energy levels are much lower. Number two is introversion and extroversion often influence the way we communicate. And so we want to make sure we're paying attention to that. And secondly, we make up a lot of stories about people who are different than us. We make up a lot of stories about people who are too introverted or too extroverted. How many of you are my introverts? Raise your hand. So in real life, I'm an introvert, right? So I call myself a highly functioning introvert because I'm so good at pretending I'm not. And way back in the 20th century, my sister and I used to own this bar in Washington, D.C. It was called the Little Lounge. My D.C. people, hopefully they know about it. And I'm an introvert. So as a bartender, I was really good, but I wasn't very friendly. I said, hey, rum and coke, what do you need? Got you your drink, please, thank you. And I moved on. My sister, on the other hand, was really warm, really friendly. She would talk to everybody. She knew your name. She knew your job. She knew your drink. And so people used to call the bar and they'd say, which Abbajay sister is working tonight? The nice one or the bitchy one? Like, I was not bitchy. I was just succinct and to the point. Anyway, so make sure we're not making up stories that people are introverted and extroverted. So introverts, an introvert source of energy is from within. So introverts have what we call a lower threshold for external stimulus. So introverted bosses are probably not walking around the office checking in on you. They're probably not picking up the phone, calling you every few minutes. They're probably sitting next to you and just emailing you instead of talking to you. They may come across as a little contained. They may not share a lot of information. They may be very kind of solitary in their working. Or when they're in their office, they may be working in their open door office with the door closed, right? So that's what introverts might be. Now the extrovert, let's go to the extrovert slide. The extrovert is more externally focused. So extroverts get their energy from the outside world, from engaging with you, from interacting with you. They probably are walking around saying hello, hello. They have what we call a higher threshold for external stimulus, which doesn't mean they don't need time alone to recharge. Of course they do. They just don't need as much of it or as frequently as the introvert. Extroverts also do this thing called internally processing. So extroverts tend to think out loud. In fact, they tend to think better when they're thinking out loud. How many of my extroverts there think better when you're talking to someone or brainstorming or thinking out loud? Yeah. And so, by the way, we introverts, we think that's the craziest thing we ever heard of. Like, why would you open your mouth if you don't know what you're going to say? So go to the next slide. So if you're going to manage up the introvert, you can go ahead and click again. It's not a thing. A couple of things for the introvert, whether you're virtual or whether you're face-to-face. First of all, you are going to need to be proactive and schedule meetings. Introverts don't tend, because we keep our energy from inside, we're not the best at being proactive at scheduling meetings. So be proactive, take responsibility, schedule those meetings. And by the way, we may cancel half of them because at the end of the day, we may be tired. That's okay. Don't take it personally. Don't assume that because your introvert isn't reaching out to you, that they don't care about you. They do. It's just not necessarily in their nature to reach out. Let your introverted boss know ahead of time what you want to talk about. Introverts tend to do a lot more internal processing before we're asked to extrovert on something. So even if it's just 5 minutes notice, give them a heads up about what they want to talk about. If you want to know what they're thinking, you are going to have to ask them. And you're going to then have to give them time to respond, which could be in a meeting or face-to-face, up to 8 seconds of silence, right? Which can be really hard for some extroverts because that silence feels like a long time. But you're really, the more space you give an introvert to think, the more they will be able to answer your question. Introverts tend to really like email or text a little bit more before you just pick up the phone. They don't necessarily love the pop-in. And don't let them disappear. Introverts are probably in heaven right now for the most part. Don't let them disappear. By the way, if you are a manager, then you need to also make sure your introverted people don't disappear too much. You don't want to overwhelm them, but make sure you're keeping them in. And who are my raging extroverts? My extroverts who are just, all the time, love to talk. All right. So, no, go back, not yet, go back, Tori. If you are a raging extrovert and you're on the Zoom call or you're face to face or you are on a conference call, I want you to remember the word wait. And wait stands for, why am I talking? Because if you're just talking to fill the space with your introverts, you don't have to do that. It will drive them away from you. It will not bring them closer. It's okay to let a little silence go on when you're with your introverts. I was doing this presentation for this global firm in Philadelphia. And we had just, yeah, see, she said, drives you crazy, doesn't, when they just talk to talk. We were doing this workshop, and this woman jumps up and goes, oh my God, I think I've been annoying my boss for the last 7 years. And I said, oh my God, is your boss here in the room? And she goes, oh my God, he's right there. So she points to the CEO of the organization. And I said to him, oh my God, has she been annoying you for 7 years? By the way, she was his executive assistant. He takes a deep breath and he looks up and he goes, dear God, yes. Apparently, he was an introvert. She was an extrovert, a raging extrovert, a lovely woman. And she used to come into his office multiple times a day and just chit chat at him. And it drove him crazy. And he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to hurt his feelings. So he basically just hid from her all day long. So they resolved that in 2 minutes, a 7-year problem. She had no idea. So anyway, make sure that you are not draining your boss's energy. All right, go ahead and rotate. Now, my extroverts, you can click it. There you go. So how many of you are extroverts? Great. So working with an extrovert, if you're their manager, even remotely or whatever, you do want to be available to engage. Your extroverted boss wants to speak with you. They want to get to know you. They want to feed off your energy a little bit, right? That's how extroverts sort of gain trust on people, by getting a sense of who they are. So you do, especially if you are an introvert, you do need to pump it up a little bit. You do need to be available to engage. You also, when engaging with the extrovert, you want to speak up. Extroverts, your thoughts don't have to be perfect. Extroverts don't care if your thoughts are perfect. What they care about is that they hear from you. So provide opportunities for human connection with them. Make sure you are making yourself available for a phone-to-phone or a Zoom call occasionally. Welcome and invite their brainstorming. As I said before, that's not necessarily the introvert's strength. We tend to like to think aside before we speak, but be that sounding board with your extroverted boss or your extroverted colleagues to help them think. Your extroverted boss, by the way, may be feeling socially isolated really quickly. So I'm guessing an extrovert boss would appreciate a phone call or a quick Zoom call with you now and then. And my extroverted boss is on the line, can tell me whether I'm right or not. So make sure you are including some video or phone conversations with your extrovert. And a good rule of thumb for your extrovert, even whether you're virtual or you're face-to-face, is because extroverts do tend to think out loud, which is a beautiful thing if you can do it. Make sure you spend some time recapping at the end of a conversation to make sure that you are that you're on the same page, because an extrovert conversation may go here, then it may go there, then it may go there, and then it may go there, and you may get a little lost. So take the time to really recap at the end, but really stay connected to your extrovert boss. All right, go ahead and slide. And my last thing for virtual managing up is, you know what? Be supportive, stay positive. The more compassion we can have, even for our bosses, the better off we're going to be. This is hard. As I said at the very beginning, a lot of bosses were not prepared for this. They're trying to figure it out the best that they can. Let your boss know that you're there. Be positive, come up with ideas. And if they shoot the first one down, come up with 5 more. But it's really about trying to understand that this is also a growth opportunity for everybody. Some people may need to go to this growth opportunity kicking and screaming, but this is a great opportunity for you to realign your relationship and to really be supportive, and for you to stay positive. Because one of the things that's going to happen is, if your boss is really bad at this remote work, you can be the person that's going to help keep your team together. together. You could be that kind of shadow boss, that shadow informal influencer that can help make this work. So be supportive, stay positive. We will all get through this together. Managing up is no different virtually than, well, it's not really different virtually than in person, but you may need to do different things. So the theory is still the same. Figure out what's working for our boss, figure out how they're operating, figure out where we can fill the gaps for how they're operating and how we're operating. And so with that, I'm going to pause and we're going to take some questions. And Tori, I don't know if you want to ask me the questions or, thank you, Beverly Jordan.
It looks like I'm unable to start my video, so I'm just going to be on audio with you. I think a lot of our pre-submitted questions, we had a lot of this covered, but I think maybe what we'll do is go with a few that are much related to this situation right now. So one of them that was submitted during the conversation was, how do you navigate having a promotion or raise conversation during this time?
So it really isn't that much different. To have a raise or promotion navigation, it's the same thing. So first of all, you got to frame why you are asking for it. My tips are always around making sure that you're laying the groundwork for why you deserve it. You always got to tie it to business results. Don't just say, because I haven't had a raise in 5 years. So you want to follow the best practices for that. And you also want to let your boss know that that's what the conversation that you want to have. So, hey boss, I don't know if there's certain times in your organization where you're supposed to be having these conversations. If there's not, then, I mean, if it's just any time, then say, hey boss, I'd really like to have a conversation about my position, about, my a potential promotion, where I'm going. I want to have a career path conversation with you. And then you have the conversation. Make sure that you don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't want to Zoom bomb your boss in that. You want to set that boss up knowing that's the conversation you want to have, and ask them when it's a good time to have that. So, and I would recommend that you either use a Zoom or a face-to-face, whichever one your boss is more comfortable with. And if this is the first time you've had it, then you might want to wait a couple more weeks till you get back into the office. If it's not the first time you've had it, you could go ahead and do it now, but it really depends on your time frame. But it's not going to look any different. Preparation is really the key for that conversation.
Do you feel, Mary, that's the same way? We had another question with asking for addressing any risk with being furloughed or laid off.
Oh, thank you for asking that question. So I just did a thing for a group of nonprofit leaders. Your bosses should really be having that transparent conversation with you. They should be as transparent or as open as they can about what they know. I would absolutely, if you are concerned about it, there's two ways you can approach it. And all of this, of course, depends on the relationship you actually have with your boss. Way number one could be the direct way. You could be like, hey, Tori, I'm gonna pretend you're my boss. Hey, Tori, I'd love to talk with you about, I have a few concerns, or, I want to set up hey, Tori, do you have a few minutes to talk? I want to talk with you about the status of our organization right now. How worried should I be about getting furloughed? What is it that you can share with me? So that's one way to do it directly. The other way could be, hey, Tori, I think the team, and me included, are getting increasingly concerned about whether or not we're still going to have jobs. I know you may not know all the answers, but could you help us understand what the status is? Is there a chance we're getting furloughed? It would really help the team to at least hear something about it from you.
That's great.
I think you need to ask.
We have a question from more of the leadership side. What recommendations do you have for anyone that is in a leadership or management position? Generally speaking, how should they be dealing with this?
All right. So what you need to be doing, here's how you need to be with it. One, you need to connect with your team. Well, there's four things. First of all, you got to take care of yourself first. So if you are a leader, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. Or we also sick of that phrase, but it's true. You need to really get yourself together first, because you need to be able to lead this team and there's something through a difficult time. So take care of yourself, understand what kind of leader you need to be, understand what kind of leader you've been, see what you need to do differently. So if you are a super task person, like moi, maybe you're going to need to bring a little bit more soft. If you're really soft, like more people. If you're super people, Maybe you need to make sure you're not forgetting to bring some tasks along. So you're going to really take a good look at what the situation calls for and what you need to bring. And then you have to take care of your team. You're going to want to connect with them right away. You're going to connect on two areas. One is, how are they? We do have to make sure that people are feeling okay. We cannot forget there is grief going on. People are losing loved ones. People's spouses are losing their jobs. Like, people are worried about their jobs. So connect with them as humans. And then connect with them on the work process. Do they have what they need to be successful on teleworking? Do they have an office space? Do they have the technology set up? How can you help? Really make sure that they are set up to work well. What do they need, right? So those are check in with them. Then you're going to check in with the team. So that's individual check-in. Then with the team, you want to start negotiating. What are the boundaries? What do I expect from you? What are your work boundaries? What are your constraints at home? What are kinds of systems and processes we want to put together as a team to make sure we keep functioning with that? And you don't want to just have that conversation once. You should have that conversation actually with your team on a weekly basis until you get in a role. Again, this is a fast moving thing that happened really quickly. So you're going to kind of become more of a conductor than ever. You'll probably have to be for those managers who are a little more hands-on in the past, you're going to have to be a little more hands-off in terms of the work. Like, you have to trust people a little bit more. For managers who are maybe a little bit more of a ghost boss like me, I have to be a little more involved with my team right now because they want a little bit more of me. So you're going to have to look on where you take care. So those are the three things I'd recommend right now.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I know we as a business we're small as well, but we had to decide really quickly, of course of action, and just to stay in communication with everyone, and to let them know that this is new for us too, and we're all figuring it out together. And just to stay in communication was the most important thing for both sides. And hopefully that's something that everybody is able to do as well.
Yeah, and I would say this, if you haven't done it, please go have a transparent conversation with your team and your staff about what they can and can't expect around furloughs. You don't have to like open the whole kimono, but I'll just be very honest. Here's what I said to my team. I said, listen, because like 75% of our engagements kind of got wiped out or postponed. I said, there's enough money to pay you all full salary through July. So we're good. And by the way, sorry, that's my dog barking. Sorry. And by the way, I've applied for this grant and this grant. So we'll reassess this in June, but my intention is to do everything we can to keep you on full salary. So just be as transparent as possible. I'm not going to take them through the up and downs every day, but I just let them know my intention and what I'm trying to do. So we have one more slide that I want to go over. If you don't know what your boss wants, go have the conversation. Go have the conversation. How do you like to work? What are your preferences, either virtually or now? What are your priorities? What's most important to you? What are your pet peeves? What drives you crazy about virtual work or regular work? And then what can I do more of, less of, or differently to work better with you? Bosses, you should have this conversation with your people. People, if your boss hasn't had this conversation, there's no reason in the world why you can't go ahead and have this conversation. So if you go to the next slide, the basic is, if your career is in that's our final tip. Make sure your bosses, remember, make sure they know how to manage up to you. Go ahead and slide one more time. Go one more time. Manage up, take control of your career. Listen, whether we like it or not, we spend more of our waking hours at work than ever. And now that our home hours are also blended with our working hours, please know that that's our life. Like, we only have one of them, right? We want to make sure that these hours we're spending at work are the best possible they can be for us and not the worst. And when we can learn to manage our relationships that matter, the relationships that influence our work life, then we can take control of our career, and then we can have a better work life. So with that, I want to say, manage up, take control of your career, be a career victor, not a career victim. And I want to thank you so much. I'll stay on for a few more minutes if you guys want. I realize I'm way over my time though. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. This has been so helpful, I hope, for everyone. Certainly a great reminder for me. I know a lot of people are starting to leave and we didn't get to all questions, but we will be sending everyone an email with a link to rewatch this video. If you want to share it with others, by all means, we hope you do. I think Mary's going to share her slides with us as well in that email, and we'll share some additional resources, some information, some articles featuring Mary so that you can have those tips ready on hand, as well as being able to purchase her book if that's something you want to have a physical copy of. So we'll get that over to you by tomorrow afternoon, and you'll be able to share those with others. And then we will be having these webinars every Thursday. Timing may change, but if you'd like to continue to attend, we'd love to have you, and we will see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.